Hello, everyone, and welcome to the final week of AI Ate My Homework. My name is Davesh Chauhan. I'm the Marketing and External Affairs Strategist here at Cyclica and the lead organizer for this year's AI Ate My Homework. Before we start, I really want to thank all of our panelists for taking the time to share their experience and expertise with us over the past 7 weeks. At Cyclica, we really strive to share knowledge with the community and support the next generation of scientists, technologists, and leaders. I'd also like to thank our audience for asking amazing questions and for joining us on this journey to explore the world of AI and drug discovery. If you have any questions, please feel free to write to us, and our past webinars can be found on our YouTube channel. Today, we'll be exploring the career paths of our amazing and diverse panelists. If you have any questions during this session, please use the Q&A feature. So let's start off with some brief introductions and what inspired our panelists to pursue their current path. Carlos, could you please introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. My name is Carlos Corbi. I'm a computational scientist at Cyclica. I decided to pursue a career in healthcare mostly because both my father and my mother, both of them were nurses. And I had I grew up with the healthcare topic at home, talking about medicine. The friends of my family were mostly nurses and doctors as well. But I took a different approach. I didn't pursue to be a medical doctor like my father maybe would like. But the real black sheep in the family is my brother, that is a lawyer. But well, that is a different history. And then I took an undergrad in the molecular biology. And the last years, I discovered bioinformatics, and I really enjoy it. And I decided to do a master in bioinformatics and computational biology. And after that, I wasn't sure to do a PhD, and I moved to an industry. I got the opportunity to work in a mid-sized pharmaceutical company. And I worked there for less than 2 years, like in a role that can be defined like a data engineer, data scientist. And because the things were a little bit too rigid, at least at the moment when I was working there, and experimental with new stuff was a little bit difficult, then I decided to come back to the academia, where I did a PhD, half computational, half experimental. The computational part was done in the Max Planck Institute in Frankfurt, and the experimental part in Spain, in the University of Granada, in the south of Spain. The topic was more biophysics and the structure of proteins. And when I finished, I was interested to work in something more like the big picture, systems biology. And I have a friend working here in the University of Toronto in the Donnelly Center, and he told me about it. It's a great center. They do high throughput biology. And they do these massive experiments that they generate a massive amount of data. And I really enjoyed the idea, and I applied, and I got a postdoc position in the Philips Scheme Lab, and I stayed there for 6 years until this April that I joined Cyclica like a computational scientist.
Thanks, Carlos. Jeremy, would you like to go next?
Sure. Hi, I'm Jeremy. Fun bit of Cyclica trivia. I was the lawyer who incorporated Cyclica at the very beginning of the company. So I have been in one way or another involved with Cyclica from the first day that the company existed. Right now I have the very corporate title of operating partner, where I'm involved in transactions and strategy. And I've been fortunate to be on the advisory board of the company the entire time. So it's been a really amazing journey watching the company transform and grow. And so that's been my journey with Cyclica. I started with a lawyer part, sorry, Carlos, and your family. But I was a practicing lawyer for about 10 years. That's in the middle part of my career. And it's been a really winding journey to get to where I am today. But I also want to just say that it's been an insanely privileged journey for me. My first lab job at Sick Kids, I got through a friend of my parents, and the whole rest of my career as me has been a pretty smoothly paved road, and that's been really something that I've been conscious of and fortunate to have experienced. But it's definitely not everybody's, and take all of my advice with a grain of salt that it could have been just, you know, privilege and accident instead of anything intentional that someone else could replicate. But before I was a lawyer, I started life in the lab. I did a PhD in molecular genetics and cell biology, University of Chicago. Instead of doing a postdoc, I stayed there for law school. Then I practiced law, moved back to Toronto, made partner, moved into the business side. And I've been sort of moving away from the lawyery stuff and more into finance and strategy stuff in a series of roles with public companies and venture-backed companies. So that's kind of my weird journey in life.
Thanks, Jeremy. Faris, would you like to go next?
Yeah, so I'm Ferris, and I'm wrapping up my first co-op term actually at Cyclica right now. So I'm a student in the biomedical engineering program at Waterloo, and so I started 2019, and I grew up in Calgary, came to Ontario to study, and I guess I've always just kind of liked biology, and so I'm just kind of exploring different fields of biotech to get a feel for what I like and what I don't like. In Calgary, when I was in high school, I did a little research at the University of Calgary, and I think that's what really kind of kicked off my interest in biology and biotech. I did a bit of research with animal behavior. So fun fact, if you've seen that meme where scientists like get snails to forget their memory, I'm the guy that did a part of that. So we actually played around with snails. We taught them to do things and used them as a model to do different experiments in learning, memory, and stress. So that's a large part of my experience. And so after coming to Waterloo, I've kind of gotten more interested in computational biology and biophysics. And so Cyclica has been a really good opportunity to gain exposure to that. But yeah, that's a bit about me.
Ellen.
Hello, my name's Ellen. I worked at Cyclica last summer for 4 months as a full stack developer for the Ligand Express team led by David. I'm currently a third year mechatronics engineering student, and Cyclica was my third co-op. And it was definitely a field that I wasn't familiar with because I took bio in high school, but I didn't know I was that interested in it. But seeing how you can combine programming with biotechnology was just something that I've like never seen before, and I've also found it very interesting. So after seeing the demo from Mo and David, I was just blown away, and then I couldn't let go of this opportunity, so I joined as an intern last summer. My background is kind of everywhere. So I was actually studying in Korea, but I moved to Canada in grade 5, and I've been studying in Mississauga since then. And I went to Waterloo to study mechatronics. And in terms of what kind of field I want to work in the future, I've been pretty open-minded, and I've been just looking at different ways to apply computer science, which is very interesting. And Cyclica was definitely one of the most like diverse opportunities that I had. So yeah, that was my exposure to biotech and how I ended up working at Cyclica.
And last but not least, Natasha.
Thanks, Davesh. Hi, everyone. My name is Natasha. As Davesh mentioned, I previously worked at Cyclica as the Marketing and External Affairs Strategist. But a bit before that, I completed my undergrad at New York University, where I studied pre-medicine and global public health. I was always very fascinated by the human body and knew that I wanted to pursue medicine. But beyond that, I was very interested in how do we prevent people from getting disease? And that's where the public health angle came in. And then after my undergrad, I moved back to Toronto and I worked at Mars Discovery District. And there I was involved in healthcare consulting, and we were helping med tech devices gain market access in Ontario, which has traditionally been a very regulatory and reimbursement heavy province in Canada. And following that, I began working at Cyclica. And alongside that, I was also doing research at Princess Margaret Cancer Center. And we were working on a project to create an app to connect young adult cancer patients across Canada. So it was really interesting to be working both at Princess Margaret in the healthcare system, but then also be working at Cyclica. And then finally, last August, I decided to start medical school. So now I'm in my second year at medical school at St. George's University. And it's been an interesting journey. Now I'm doing it online, so we'll see where it takes me. But it's been really great to get to know the healthcare system from different angles and see different disciplines within the system. So that's a bit about me.
Wonderful. It's great to see everyone's background and how diverse it is. I think you all have something very insightful to add to this conversation. To start off, Carlos, you've worked with globally renowned institutions, including the Max Planck Institute and the Donnelly Center here in Toronto. Did you ever consider pursuing a more academic career, and what led you to transition from that path into industry?
Actually, I did consider to continue in academia, right? I mean, after the postdoc, the natural next step is to be a principal investigator, no? Have your own lab, and that is a great position because you have freedom to research whatever you want in the way that you want, and you have control of the budget, you have control of the people that you're hiring and the direction that you move in your lab, right? That is a great position to be, right? I mean, because it's really, from the point of view of a researcher, is really, really rewarding, right? But for me, the reason that stopped me to don't keep in academia was that one of the let's say things that you have to do to be a successful PI is to publish, right? I mean, publish is the currency that everyone is going to judge you, to give you more money, even students to join you to your lab, you know, everything. And from that point of view, publishing papers is not that rewarding for me. I just prefer to build things, right? I mean, I'm really more happy when I build something and that thing is applied and have an impact in the real world. And you can do the same thing in academia, but I think it's more difficult. And also the Cyclica, I think it's a very, very, very how to say this? What would be the best adjective? I think unique place, right? Because maybe it mixes the things that I like from industry and the things that I like from academia, right? I mean, you have this part that you are going to build something that is going to have a real impact in the real world. But at the same time, you have some freedom, you can develop your own ideas, you can contribute, you know, and you can keep learning, right? That is for me, is one of the most important things, right? And that is the reason that I decided to join Cyclica. I'm been here for a little bit more than 4 months, and I'm super, super happy.
It's amazing to hear your journey and, you know, the things that you value in your, you know, trajectory, you know, as a scientist. And it can be difficult to kind of pick the right organizations to, you know, spend that quality time with. To Ellen and Faris, you know, as co-ops, what advice would you guys give to students who are seeking and selecting co-op opportunities? Any guiding principles that have helped you out?
Who wants to go first?
I think in terms of applying for jobs, definitely just start early and, you know, don't be picky, because I think even if you get a job that you don't necessarily think falls under what, you know, your current interests are, you never know what might happen, right? Like coming to Cyclica, I knew it's, you know, it's in biotech. They do a lot of stuff that I'm interested in, but there's, you know, within any company, there's so many different roles and I guess projects or things that people are working on. So, you know, within a company, across companies, there's a lot of freedom. So, and, you know, given the virtual work environment, there is that added level of freedom as well. So yeah, definitely don't be picky, just kind of, you know, give things a shot. You never know what might happen.
Yeah, I think I definitely agree. But since I've had more co-ops, I've had co-ops that I wasn't happy with myself. But that also became the stepping stone to learning something new. And I've been getting jobs with the stuff that I learned because I didn't like my job in the first place. So never miss an opportunity, be open-minded, and you all honestly never know who you're going to meet on your way. And those people can be the most influential people that you might encounter in life. So also, I noticed that as you get older, there's a big pressure to apply for big companies, and if you don't get a job at big companies, it doesn't mean anything to you. But I think it's really important to be open-minded and just look for things that you're really interested in rather than the name of the company or the size of the company. Because all the startups that I've worked for, I think I've had a lot better experiences than a lot of my friends who worked at bigger companies. So, just keep applying, look for what you want to learn, and just, yeah, honestly, keep applying.
And to add on to that, I've only had one co-op so far, but I think it's, especially in the current generation, I find that sometimes there's a really strong push to, get things done as quickly as you can, be, super successful by whatever, people define success to be. But I think, when you're applying for jobs, don't beat yourself up if things don't go the way you hoped they would. Try to show yourself a bit of self-compassion. It goes a long way. And don't compare yourself to others. Everything is going to work out in the end, right?
Yep. Definitely the right mindset to have, especially in this competitive world.
Wonderful. Faris, you definitely joined Cyclica at an interesting time during this whole COVID pandemic. As you plan to go back to university, is there any advice that you'd like to share to kind of help thrive in this virtual environment?
I think, especially because, with social distancing and everything, you're going to be inside a lot more, and you're probably not going to have as much social interaction. So this might sound a bit cheesy, but self-care is so important, because if you're not, eating well, if you're not taking care of yourself, if you're not, seeing people or even just talking to people virtually, right, you're not going to be able to be productive or get anything you want to get done, right? So I think before you focus on just trying to be successful in school or trying to get, an amazing job offer, start with how you're feeling. If you're not feeling good, then you got to start there. And then once you're feeling better on, a day-to-day basis, once you're feeling yourself, then focus on, working towards your goals. I think that's the biggest thing.
I think those are really great points, especially related to co-op experiences. And those experiences are so important. They really bridge education and workplace. And I think to add to that, really document everything, whether it's, writing in a journal or using social media like Twitter, or finding ways to document all the things that you're learning. I think that's a time where most people are just overloaded with new experiences. They're meeting new people. They're learning new skills, maybe even skills that they didn't know existed, even if it's something small, like how to communicate better with other people in the workplace. And so showing that growth is so important. And I think as you go on to other opportunities, people want to know your experiences. And a co-op opportunity is one of the most important ways where you can show all those experiences that you had, good and bad. So being able to narrate that and tell the story behind that only comes if you've really been able to remember all the steps and have that documented. So I think that would be the one thing that I would add.
And as a seasoned professional, Jeremy, any advice that you'd like to give?
Other than don't call people seasoned. I guess it's better than grizzled or decrepit. I guess the closest I ever had to a co-op experience, I had summer jobs in labs in undergrad that were not so structured, and I guess I just encourage people to seek out as many different experiences as possible. Natasha, it's interesting. I wouldn't have thought about documenting in that way, but that makes a ton of sense, and it very much connects to the thing that I've come to value, which is self-awareness and growth. When I am interviewing people now for positions at Cyclica or anywhere else, the most important thing that I'm looking for is, what have they learned about themselves? What do they know about themselves? How do they identify their strengths and weaknesses? And what are their opportunities for personal growth? And I think that, you know, that kind of self-awareness obviously is hand in hand with, you know, with journaling and with reflecting in that way. So I think that's really critical, because that's how you grow as an individual. You are the point of any equation that you can change, the only one that you actually have any control over changing. And so I think that's, you know, that's really important as you go through. And in reverse, also focus on people. Like there are a million different interesting things to do in the world. What makes the biggest difference in my own personal happiness, and I think as I've seen in other people as well, is the people you're doing it with. Like even if it's virtual, just the pleasure of coming to work day in and day out, you know, being able to give and take a little bit of teasing and humor and enjoyment of dogs or guitars or music or whatever, you know, whatever it is, that the human beings that you're with are one of the biggest factors, and you're going to spend a lot of time with them. So pay attention to that almost more than anything else.
Beautiful. Jeremy, so let's dive a little bit deeper into your journey. So you definitely have a unique combination, and I'm curious, what inspired you to pursue, you know, both science and law, and what role did higher education play in your career path?
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting question to reflect on. It definitely was not so much an inspiration as just like a random walk or Brownian motion. It was just trying to make the right decision for me at that time with the best information I had. You know, if I went back, I think there are way more direct ways to getting to where I am now. I could have, you know, I could have done a master's in consulting or an MBA, or, you know, the PhD and the law degree has been a cool combination, and it's definitely been a good journey and skill set, but it's absolutely not the only way to get to anywhere. So, you know, really the core for me was just, I've always been really fascinated by science and nature. And that's something that was, you know, heavily encouraged and rewarded as I was growing up by my parents and my teachers. And, you know, I mentioned that first job at Sick Kids. I was in Harry Schachter's lab, where we worked on a group of enzymes called glycosyl transferases. And what I was doing was running assays on enzymes from fresh pig intestines. And the lab postdoc went to the slaughterhouse every week to get the pig intestine to prepare the enzymes for these assays. And I think I was just totally in awe of the lengths that she went to run these experiments, like that sort of combination of passion and masochism that is so common in science, and has definitely been an ongoing theme in my career. You know, I worked in a series of labs, mostly biochem through undergrad. I got fascinated by gene therapy. I think one of the transformational things for me in that time was I was super psyched about gene therapy, and I took myself to a conference in Washington, DC as a third-year undergrad. It got me my first grad school offer, which wasn't what I ended up pursuing, but it was such a cool experience of just, and I am a massive introvert. It was like incredibly difficult and painful to make myself go do that and to have the conversations that I had in that context. And it's just a skill. And the more you do it, the better you'll get at it. Although, I mean, you may assess that I peaked at a lower level than others. But the point is, I think, to just work on those interactions, pursue the things that you're interested in and excited about, because that's been what's taken me from one thing to another along the way, is just, what am I really excited about right now? And partly that's, you know, a good career plan, and partly it is, you know, the opportunity of the privileges that I've had and the people I've gotten to know, and partly it is just me, and then I'm crap at making myself do things I don't like. And so if from me knowing myself, if I'm doing something I'm not enjoying, I'm not doing it well, I'm not doing it intensely, I'm not doing it happily, and I think that's just, you know, that's not going to change for me. Like, I know that about me, and that guides what I do now. You know, so I applied for grad school after that. At the time, you know, I thought I was going straight up academic. I thought I was going to be, you know, a tenured prof somewhere one day. And I think the shift for me in grad school was more about seeing how much You know, in the experimental world, luck plays a component in your success. Like, did you pursue the right experiment that led to an exciting result, even though you can't know that at the beginning? You know, is it a positive result versus a negative result? You know, which is the outcome of a well-designed experiment, but the difference between success and failure in your grad school career. Like, if you work hard and you're smart, you could still be unlucky with timing or outcomes. And so that was really challenging for me. So I thought about, like, well, what could I do that, you know, where if I work hard and I'm intelligent about it, I can succeed. That took me to law school. And, you know, I practiced law for 10 years. I made partner. I went through that whole path too. I guess, you know, 10 years is about when I get really bored of doing something, but also, I kind of got to the end of the road and I looked around and, like, what's next? And that's been a big component for me, is just to be constantly learning. And that's, I think, fundamentally what I enjoy.
It's great to see how, you know, your scientific interests have changed and how that also kind of guides, you know, the career path that you want to take and what interests you. So I guess maybe kind of digging a little bit more into that. So, you know, you're originally really interested in genomics and gene therapy. What excites you the most about, you know, the AI and drug discovery landscape, and, you know, what's to come in the future?
Oh, I mean, you know, if you look at most drug discovery labs now, they look almost exactly like they did 50 years ago. And that's insane. It's clearly not the best way to go about things. The cost of discovering drugs has gone up. The efficiency of R&D spend has gone down. Every macro trend of the pharma industry says that, you know, as a whole, we're doing it wrong. And I think, you know, AI is a tremendous opportunity to transform multiple steps of that process. I think, you know, what I love about Cyclica is the way that it's applying the technology in a really thoughtful way that's connected to the chemistry and the biology, which is, you know, such a critical component of any application of technology in general, AI in particular. So you know, those are the things that are really exciting for me. And then, you know, just the business model of what we're doing, which is like a super nerdy operating partner thing, I guess, about, you know, how do we pull all this really cool technology into a massively scalable business and do a ton of transformational good in the world, and get investors really excited, and get pharma really excited, and get employees really excited, and just build this really powerful, exciting story around transforming drug discovery and making that world a better place and the world in general a better place by just making it more accessible to more people and bringing more people into the process. And all of those things are big shifts in the world of drug discovery that Cyclica is helping to lead. So you can't do better than that.
I'm not sure if anyone else kind of wants to add on what excites them about the AI and drug discovery industry. Maybe Natasha, do you want to talk a little bit about what interests you in the biotech space?
Sure. For me, I think I heard someone speak at a conference, and they were saying that it's frequently stated it takes, I believe, 16 years for research evidence to reach clinical practice and actually be integrated into clinical practice. And if you just think about 17 years ago, I mean, that would take us to 2003, and we didn't have iPhones, we barely had camera phones. And if you think about healthcare and life sciences and the growing conversation of mental health, you know, epidemic and pandemic preparedness, antibiotic resistance, polypharmacology, all of these things have just really come into conversation very recently. And so to think that we would have to wait so long to have some sort of meaningful impact clinically is quite concerning. So I think that's where biotechnology has a really unique opportunity to accelerate sort of the pace in which we take research and advancements in research and actually practice them clinically. And it's interesting to see how traditional companies like Big Pharma are starting to recognize the role of biotech companies in actually achieving that and achieving their goals. And I think that's also what's great about working at a place like Cyclica. I know Ellen mentioned this about, typically you, when you're looking for co-op opportunities, you initially sort of, get attracted to these big companies, but now the industry is so much more integrated that you can work at Cyclica and have an entrepreneurial startup environment and get that experience. But at the same time, it's so well connected with big pharma companies and companies globally that you also get that other experience. So it's very interesting to see where it's going. And I think having Cyclica in Toronto is such a great way to, stay on the ride and see what's to come.
Definitely kind of adding on to that, like with my background in medicinal chemistry, really in the lab, I really found passion in understanding how molecules work and proteins and really just exploring the proteome. When I joined Cyclica and just learning about the whole ecosystem being, big pharma, patients, biotech, seeing how those are all integrated and learning about them and their intricacies, I think really sparked a passion in me to appreciate different perspectives and, what facilitates some of the decision-making at the end of the day, beyond just protein and ligand interactions. So Natasha, I remember when we first met, you were very passionate about healthcare and becoming a physician. Given that you worked at Cyclica, how has that supported your journey in becoming, a more modern physician?
That's a great question. So I think the first thing is to recognize that education is very conservative. It's traditional. And compared to working at a place like Cyclica, which is very forward thinking, it is a huge contrast. And so having worked at Cyclica and then going back to school, I now feel that I can really use what I'm learning in medical school in a more relevant way later on in the future, because I know where the industry is going. And so for example, when we learn about physical exam, in my mind, I'm thinking about things like, how does physical exam work with respect to telemedicine? When we learn about pharmacology and we learn about drugs, schools really teach you primarily the target and the mechanism of action of drugs. But I'm also thinking about what are the off targets, right? And what's like the polypharmacology of the drugs that we're learning. So I think that's the benefit of having both work experience and then also being in academia, because you're able to bridge the two. And on top of it, I think, being at Cyclica and being at other workplaces, and I think this is what's great about co-op opportunities, is when you surround yourself in one world, you sort of just see the world in that one way and that one frame of mind. And so it's so important to just expose yourself to as many environments as possible. And I think being in school and being education, I'm able to see, okay, the system in so many ways is still very traditional, but we do have something to look forward to. And that's like where a company like Cyclica fits in. So hopefully when, school is intense, but hopefully when I finish this chapter, I'll be able to sort of apply what I've learned in a more innovative way in what Cyclica is doing.
Wonderful. Ellen, you're going down that sort of software engineer track. Maybe do you want to highlight some of the experiences you had at Cyclica and how that helped you, in your career trajectory?
So when I was working at Cyclica, it was my first developer internship. So I didn't have a lot of experience going into it, but Mo and David actually gave me a really good feedback at the end of my internship, saying that it's good that you want to tackle things your own way, but at the same time you have so many resources around you. So asking a lot of questions, even if you think it's like a dumb question, that will definitely get you ahead in terms of learning and adapting to new environments. For like a biotech starter, it's kind of hard and frustrating at the time when you're reading code, but you have no idea what it means because you have no biology background. But you have all these people around you and so many resources. And I think just like what I experienced at Cyclica definitely made me learn that you have to be resourceful if you want to be successful, and just asking questions, connecting with people, and that definitely made me have a broader perspective in terms of what field I want to go into. So when you're choosing a co-op placement and you think I don't think this field is for me, you actually never know what you're going to learn. So I think that definitely made me also realize what I'm interested in after my internship. So that narrowed down the field of job applications in the future and being more specific into what I want to pursue for my full-time. And yeah, it was a very valuable experience for me, and definitely recommend branching out different sectors when applying for internships.
And Faris, given that you're studying biology and chemistry and biomedicine, how has your experience at Cyclica, fostered either your scientific interests or your thoughts on different career trajectories as a developer, as a scientist, maybe even as an entrepreneur?
I think the most interesting part about being at Cyclica, considering I'm interested in biotech, but at the same time, having only recently started school, kind of like Ellen, I don't really have a really strong bio background, right? And so I think the most interesting part or exciting part has been asking questions as well, and being able to listen to people at the company giving presentations about the stuff they've been working on, right? At Cyclica especially, because there's so many different projects going on, partnered with so many different pharmaceutical companies, I think just, learning from everyone else's work has been just an amazing opportunity. For example, I remember at one of the presentations, they were talking about a project they're doing with a pharmaceutical company and what techniques they're using. And I talked to the person who presented afterwards. And it was really interesting because, during the presentation, I didn't necessarily understand all of the terms that were mentioned, but after talking to the person who presented, I was able to get a better understanding, of what they're doing and what their next steps are, right? And all it took was just a simple Slack message in the virtual room environment, right? So I think that's been the most exciting part. And I think especially in the pharmaceutical industry, because a lot of drugs or classes of drugs have existed for quite a while now, right? So I think the great thing about biotech startups like Cyclica is that with more advanced techniques, they're able to identify different pathways, right? Explore different ways to target diseases or conditions that may already have existing drugs, but have, side effects that people have just kind of come to accept, right? So I think that's also another really exciting part of the field that I appreciate.
Natasha, as you learn about pharmacology in medical school, maybe how does the polypharmacology spotlight take a different direction to the way you and your peers are learning about mechanism of action, different drug classes, anything that you want to add on there?
Sure, yeah, it's still quite preliminary, I would say, at this time, but I think understanding mechanism of action is actually quite important in medicine. It's understanding the physiology of the drugs, which has become critical. And I think having a background at Cyclica, I've been able to have some of that foundational knowledge, which has been useful. When it comes to polypharmacology, I wouldn't say that's a huge part of the discussion right now and a part of our curriculum right now. I hope that it will be in the future. And I think that just sort of speaks to where the industry was previously. And I think that it will become, a bigger part of our curriculum as we move forward. But I think understanding side effects has become actually a big component of our education and understanding drugs and how they work. So I think since we have a clinical aspect to that, we'll also start to see, an understanding of off targets and polypharmacology. So I think it's to come.
Great. Kind of building on this theme, Carlos, is there any advice that you'd like to pass on to our audience who are interested in becoming, the scientists of tomorrow? We're definitely seeing a lot of more interdisciplinary areas of study. A lot of biology majors want to kind of go down that computational route and vice versa. Is there anything that you'd like to share?
Well, first say that everyone in this panel have said a lot of things that I completely agree, and it's going to be difficult to add something meaningful to all this great advice and sharing their experiences. I think that, yeah, it's very important to be multidisciplinary. Don't focus in one thing, right? I mean, don't put all the eggs in one basket, right? It's, for instance, something that Jeremy said that is very true, but sometimes it doesn't matter how well you did the experiment, how you smart you are, that experiment can fail, and that can happen, right? And then you need at least a project B that will save you, and graduate, right? I would say that what like a scientist, the most difficult thing and at the same time the most important is to be familiar with mistakes and failing, because it's what you do. You do a lot of experiments and very few of them work. And usually when you read a paper, you only see 20% of the job that have been done, right? I mean, there is a lot of things that you do, you fail, and you learn. And the biggest or the wiser teacher that you will have in your life is making mistakes. I mean, the things that you will learn making mistakes, it's how it works, right? It's how life works. And don't be afraid to try new things, to have a diverse experience, especially early on in your career. And that for sure will build up, and all the network that you have built, and being in different places, having different experience, for sure that will help you for sure to be successful. Yeah.
Like a common question that we get quite often is like, we have experimental scientists that are, really interested about AI and computational approaches. Given, your experience doing a little bit of both, is there any advice that you'd like to give to, maybe young experimental scientists that kind of want to go down that computational route, but don't really know what their first steps are? It can be quite intimidating. Is there anything that you'd like to share on that?
Well, it's getting easier and easier, right? I mean, the barrier to get inside of the computational work, and especially in artificial intelligence, is getting lower, right? I mean, there is a lot of people working, building amazing tools, making playing in the field, right? There is a lot of tools, a lot of material online. There is like MIT have a lot of open courses. Coursera, for instance, has a lot of material. There is a lot of YouTube videos about it. I mean, I will say that don't be afraid for the math and for learning new stuff, because it's just one step at a time, at a time, like everything, right? I mean, today you will learn something, and that something will help you to reach a little bit farther in the topic, right? And yeah, the early 2000s, right? Linux, you need a manual of this thick, right, just to install Linux, right? And right now it's super easy, right? I mean, it's how open source and all these amazing things that we are doing as a society, that yeah, it accelerates discovery and accelerates people, reaching their goals. And yeah, then just to wrap up, just to say it in one word, don't be afraid, you can do it.
So on the subject of, I guess, like continuous education, Jeremy, what's your opinion on, online courses, certificates, just as you get into your career, just expanding your knowledge on a daily basis?
Yeah, I mean, continuous learning is just one of the most important things. And I think, interestingly, like Natasha, what you said about the timeline of drug discovery is actually not that different from the timeline of career. Like what you said about that, 17 years, and like that was 2003, and like, wow, 2003 is also when I graduated from law school. Like that, like that's the time frame of the career that's ahead of, others of you, not me. But I think the takeaway from that is that two things. One, to pick up a lot of skills so that you can adjust and see the future as best you can, and aim for something that is far away, that is really exciting, and set like some big goals and things that don't seem that proximate right now, and like aim there. But also, you're always going to continually be adjusting the trajectory of your career and your skill set, and like the pace of change is accelerating, and that ability to learn and to find ways to learn, whether that's online courses or apps or Twitter or scientific literature, like which is still sort of foundational knowledge, and the way we actually learn things. Like keep shifting your trajectory to take you where you want to go, and that's just continuous learning. Like just keep being curious, keep absorbing as much as you can, keep trying new things.
Definitely adding on to you, Jeremy, like social media has definitely played an important role in at least my learning. There's a few LinkedIn groups I'm a part of that are really drug hunter centric, and just following and being part of those groups, you learn a lot, everything from different protein classes to different drug modalities to everything. And that has been incredibly insightful to me on a daily basis, just to get a flow of information that way.
And if I could add on, especially about learning about computational biology, I think you don't necessarily need to have a strong foundational knowledge in biochemistry or math or physics. What really got me interested in biotech was the field of molecular dynamics simulations, or that technique. And in high school, I kind of just stumbled upon it online when I was trying to understand how people are using new techniques to accelerate drug discovery. And after doing some reading, when you look at all of these techniques or kind of read on them, it's easy to kind of just think like, oh, these are really exclusive to companies, these are super complex. It would take forever for me to figure out how to use them. But kind of like Carlos mentioned, a lot of this stuff is online and open source. Like for molecular dynamics, I started reading into it and I realized I could install it on my laptop, install all these packages. And, with molecular dynamics, the cool thing is, you can take a structure and simulate how it might behave in a certain, environment. And the cool thing was that I didn't necessarily need a fancy setup or, a lab setting to actually do any of this stuff. I was able to just download the distributions of the packages and simulate, a single molecule of argon, right? And obviously it's not world changing or anything, but the barrier to get started is a lot lower than I think a lot of people might think, so.
Wonderful. Just looking at time, I think we'll wrap up soon. If anyone has any questions, feel free to share it with our panelists here. But I guess for the time being, is there any final thoughts that you all would like to share and to pass on to our aspiring scientists, technologists, leaders of tomorrow?
Well, I will say that I agree a lot with something that Ferris said later on, that was, don't compare yourself too much. There is a canonical way to do the things, but it's not necessarily the way to do it. And yeah, just explore, and eventually, if you work and you learn stuff, eventually everything will put in the right. You will be in the right place eventually.
I can add on to that, and I think it's so important to just take the first step. And if you're not sure what the first step is, it's sort of whatever is in front of you. You never know where that one opportunity will lead you. And sometimes having abundance of choice is great. But if you don't have that choice, whatever opportunity you can find, whether it's online, whether it's something volunteer-based, mix your skill set and your interests. For me, I was always a science student. And at Cyclica, I was in a marketing role, and I had never taken a marketing course before. And so my skill set in a way really aligned with marketing communication, but my interest had always been science-based. And so I think even in a lot of science-based companies, people maybe with perhaps more creative mindsets don't realize that there's a place for them in these industries or in these companies, and it's very much needed. So I think be open, and you won't be able to find these opportunities unless you're putting yourself out there. So don't be afraid to do it, because it is hard. And I know that I've definitely, had my fair share of needing to be vulnerable and being nervous about, starting opportunities, even going to a networking event or cold emailing someone. But the more you do it, the easier it becomes. So it's just important to start.
So I think we talked a lot about breadth and new things and jumping in, and all of those things are really important. And I think I just want to rotate that 90 degrees and say, when you find those things, it creates a huge amount of value to go deep, to just become an expert, to immerse yourself and dive in. And because I think that is what, that depth of understanding is what lets you see things that other people don't see. And it's really it's that combination, it's that breadth of having to be able to see the big picture, but also, being able to walk through each molecule of the tree in that forest, in some kind of tree. So you can jumble your analogies, but also like contribute things that nobody else can, that you have, you know, a unique skill set that comes as much from depth as it does from breadth. And I would say don't ignore that aspect. Do everything.
Ellen, do you want to go next?
I think it's really easy for students to be afraid of trying something because it just all sounds so fancy and very like difficult. But like Faris said, you know, just I think it's really important just to talk to someone to get the general knowledge. And when you have like a hands-on experience, then you get more interested in it, and that becomes your, you know, boost for wanting to learn more. So once you get over that learning curve, then it becomes a lot easier to you, and then you'll absorb a lot more information a lot faster. And I think it's just important not to like give up in the beginning just because it just seems hard, but just keep going. And if you need motivation, talk to people who are in the field, talk to the experts. They love talking about this stuff. So yeah, don't be afraid to ask any questions or like expand your networks. And I think that's like the advice that I want to give.
Faris.
I think what Jeremy said about having depth is super important, because as someone who still doesn't have a lot of depth in many areas of knowledge, I think like take it one step at a time. You know, there's, like a lot of us have said, there's so much stuff online that you can access. And so if you're interested in a topic, you know, it's easy to kind of get overwhelmed by just how much knowledge there is. So I think just kind of chunking things out, taking things one step at a time, and not, you know, not putting too much pressure on yourself, because knowledge is just going to keep growing, right? And so as long as you just continue to learn what you're interested in, you know, things will work out.
And I'd say for myself, be open to new opportunities and perspectives. If you're curious, reach out. There are many people out there who share their knowledge with you. Dream big, but also remember to be patient and to put in the work. With that, I think, you know, we'll wrap up here. I really want to thank everyone for attending the whole AI My Homework series. It means a lot to us, and the fact that you can be with us on this journey. We hope that you stay safe, and we'll see you very soon. Take care.